the Director of Thought Leadership at Trialogue, and I'll be your moderator for today. We host these monthly webinars on the last Thursday of every month. So if you haven't been attending them, please do mark your calendars and watch your emails for the various topics that we cover. Today, we're looking at how companies can support the communities around their operations. For many years, corporate social investment has largely been associated with individual projects: a school built, a program funded, an after-school program, a community organization supported. While these interventions have undoubtedly created positive impacts and they remain important, the expectations placed on business are changing, and stakeholders and communities increasingly want to see how companies are creating lasting value in the communities around their operations. So I'm looking forward to today's discussion when we'll unpack that topic. And I'd like to thank AECI in particular for supporting this webinar and this important topic today. Before we kick off, a few technical points. So firstly, I know we get asked this a lot, but we are recording this webinar, and the recording and the write-up will be shared on our website and on the Trialogue Knowledge Hub, and an email will be sent to everyone that registered. So if you do need to jump off, don't worry, you can always access the recording afterwards. You'll notice that the platform allows for a lot of engagement. So I can see some of you are already in the chat introducing yourselves. Please do use that chat to chat with other delegates, introduce yourselves. But if you'd like to ask a question, please you'll see it just above the chat box at the bottom of the screen, a green Ask a Question button. So please write your question in, then push the Ask a Question button, and that will show up on the Q&A panel. I'll be looking at the Q&A panel to take questions for the panelists in the discussion. And I'd ask you please to just direct your question to one or more of the panelists and to make it as succinct as possible so that I can pick up on as many of those as possible. You'll also see that we'll bring up various polls, and there's an opportunity to participate in those, so I encourage you to do that. And at the end, there'll be a rating on the platform and a link to a short survey. I'd encourage you to please do the survey. We do use those to change the webinars and to try and improve them, and we also use it to get suggestions on what topics our audience most wants to hear about. Okay, so that's all on the technical side. And I'm going to just move on to the agenda. So I'm going to give a short introduction, after which we'll have our panelist opening statements. And we have 4 great panelists lined up today: Nicole Solomon from AECI, Teresa Michael from Africa Tikkun Bambanani, Sianda Siko from Sibanye Stillwater, and Sarah Jane Brink from Siyabonga Africa. They'll each provide an opening statement, after which we'll go into a moderated Q&A. And this is where I really encourage you to ask those questions and to really make the discussion richer through sharing your experiences and your questions. And then we'll close up, aim to close at 11. We actually, based on the feedback from previous webinars, extended them from 1 hour to 1.5 to allow for that richer discussion. Okay, we're going to bring the first poll up now, and if you can just respond to that. We'd just like to know which type of organization you're representing. We've had a wonderful response to this webinar with hundreds of people registering. So we just want to see who's in the audience today so that we can help the panelists and I can tailor it to our audience. While that's up and you are voting, let me see if the votings are coming through. Yeah. I just want to, for those who are new, I do see familiar names that have registered, but also some new names. Just spend a minute telling you a little bit about Trialogue. So Trialogue is a small business that focuses on responsible business and helping companies to become better businesses. And we do this in 2 broad ways. The first one is through our consulting or advisory service. Here we offer CSI and sustainability strategy support, monitoring and evaluation support, as well as reporting services. And this includes social impact reports, foundation reports, sustainability and integrated reports. And then the second broad way we support companies is through our thought leadership platforms. These webinars are obviously one of those, but we also have our annual Business and Society Handbook and Business and Society Conference. And just to note the Trialogue Knowledge Hub, for those of you that haven't visited it, I would encourage you to do so. It's a free repository of information on social impact topics with loads of research, case studies, etc., and a great search functionality. So I'd encourage you to visit that. Okay, let me have a look at our poll responses so far. I can see people are still voting. It looks like we are about half nonprofits in the audience, quite a few big business. I think that's the second biggest category there. Okay, that's good to know. And I saw in the registration, we do have a lot of kind of heavy industry and extractive company representatives on the line, which I think makes sense given the topic. So I do encourage you to also share your thoughts on this topic and your experiences. Okay, I'm going to bring up poll 2 now, which just asks your organization, whether it's a nonprofit, a big business, small business, it may be less relevant to the consultants in the audience, but your organization's approach to community impact. Is it primarily project-based? Is it a mix of projects and more systemic work? Or is it focused more on the systemic work? And while everyone's voting on that, I just want to share our research findings from the 2025 handbook on this topic. So one of the broad sectors we ask about is social and community development, which covers a lot of different things, but I think most closely matches what we're talking about today. And we found in our research that this was the second most supported sector, and 84% of the companies in our sample said that they supported something in community and social development, and on average it received 14% of CSI spend. You'll see that education was the biggest sector in terms of corporate support, and there's obviously an overlap. So companies that are supporting communities around their operations might be supporting them with education. So the percentage going into communities around operations would be a lot higher than what we see, than the 14% we see. If we look at the breakdown of that sector, the social and community development one, we see that over half of the funding was going to youth and children. And I think that's in line with the case study, the AECI case study that we'll be looking at today. So a lot of it going to youth skill development programs, as well as children and orphans and vulnerable children programs. And then when we ask where it goes in terms of type of intervention, most of it's going to nonprofit or welfare organizations, almost half, and programs. And then you see that 22% of that is actually also going into infrastructure in the communities surrounding operations. Okay, I want to have a quick look at the results. And we see from our poll, thanks to everyone that's voted so far, just over half saying that their approach is a mix of project-based work and then longer term, and an almost equal number on either end of that. So as people join, please do continue to vote in both the polls, and there'll be a few more later in the session. So now that you've seen the stats, let's move on to our panelists to put some color and stories around these stats. As I mentioned at the start, we have 4 excellent panelists lined up. Nicole Solomon, the Group Head DEI and Social Impact at AECI. Thanks, Nicole, and thanks for supporting this webinar. Teresa Michael, the Chief Executive Officer of Africa Tikkun Bambanani. Sianda Siko, the Head of Sustainability Programs at Sibanye Stillwater. And Sarah Jane Brink, the Center Manager at Siyabonga Africa. I am going to stop sharing my slides now and ask Nicole, if you can please turn on your camera and mic. Now, we've seen that AECI has increasingly focused on partnerships that support more holistic development around your operations. Why has your strategy shifted, and how are you repositioning your CSI to be more a lever for sustainable development rather than a portfolio of individual projects?
Thank you, Kathy, and good morning, everyone. I think having been in this space for a while, we've had to ask ourselves some tough questions and really try and answer what do we want to achieve at the end. And I think AECI having a purpose that reads, "We are one AECI for a better world," is how do we leave our communities in a more sustainable way than what we found them. Which means long after we, stop funding them, those programs are still able to sustain themselves and continue. Now, working backwards was the challenge, and then how do we repivot or repackage our strategy to talk to that ambition? We changed our focus from charitable donations or grants to a more strategic long-term investment that drives sustainable development. We shifted from, looking at projects specific to a more integrated development model. In other words, really bearing in mind which demographics of the community we want to impact, which communities we want to impact, really mapping a baseline study of communities that are within a 5 or 10 kilometer radius around our operating sites or our customer sites, and asking a strong question of what is our social license to operate in that area. We then decided, it's very well enough to understand the needs of the communities in those areas. What are the things that AECI is able to sustainably solve for to make those communities more sustainable and put them in a much more better trajectory to thrive after long after we have left the community. We then decided, well, education from foundation phase right through to the pipeline for talent or access to the workplace would be something we want to do, not just classrooms or project-based or maths. You mentioned, took me back to our previous work on just, Saturday classes. We found that wasn't sustainable, and you can't really measure the long-term impact of that. But we took it a step further to say, well, if you are in education, you need food security and water security. You need that are your fundamental needs to be able to thrive in your education journey. So that was something we incorporated in our education portfolio. We also looked at economic development and how do we create social enterprises that can build and grow in our societies that generate an income, create jobs, and sustain livelihoods. Lastly, we looked at environmental sustainability and what are the environmental challenges that we can solve for, but also make them commercially viable, something like waste management or water security. And ultimately, we looked at a depth over breadth. So instead of having multiple projects, multiple partners across the country or across the world for that matter, how do we streamline and really focus on strategic partners that have a national reach that could drive our strategy, where we could have deliberate impact and an M&E plan that we can measure our outcomes on a more deliberate basis. I think, Kathy, for me, that was the long and short of how we try to repivot and repackage our strategy.
Thanks, Nicole. Interesting to hear the depth over breadth, as well as your 3 different focus areas and your approach to M&E, and we're going to get into all of those in more detail when we get into the discussion. So thank you. But for now, can I ask Teresa to come on for your opening statement? So Africa Tikkun Bambanani partners with AECI in offering a cradle to career model. And Nicole touched on this, not just one area, but through the life cycle of young people. Why is this approach important if we want to create lasting change? And how has your partnership with AECI enriched the communities around their operations?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Nicole, for having me. At Africa to Kun, we believe that lasting change doesn't happen through once-off intervention. It happens when you walk the journey with the child, with the teacher, with the family, and then ultimately with the community. And because we have a community reach in all 9 provinces, we have been able to work successfully with AECI because, as Nicole said earlier, the projects that we are doing with them are in the vicinities within a 5 to 10 kilometer radius of where their mining activities taking place. And that is why our cradle to career approach is so important. If you want to change the trajectory of a young person's life, we all know the importance of ECD, where we have to start early because these are the building blocks and the most fundamental years of a child's life. So many years ago, we started with an ECD project with AECI in the Marikana, Rustenburg areas where their mining activities are taking place. This was very successful. And that is where Nicole then came to us and said, now, we do not want the project to end. We do not want our investment to end here at ECD. How do we take it to the next level? And because Africa to Kun has a 30-year experience in their Cradle to Career project, where we take children from ECD into schools, into high schools, we assist them with the matrics, and then we prepare them for university. This is a project that we have now started with AECI. It has been wonderful to track the children through the through the fundamental years of ECD where we started, and now we're taking them into primary school and into high school. And now we are working with not only the children, with the principal, with the teacher, with the parents. There is parent intervention, there is health days, and you find that this now changes an entire community. The whole community is changed because of this education project that we are implementing in the areas. In terms of ECD, we have created more jobs because we started with ECD centers that had 10 children. Now they have 60 and 70 children. The principal is now the owner and the CEO and the proud owner of her small business, of her ECD center. She has now provided more jobs for women in the community. This now overflows into her households. Parents are now more involved. And then we now have involved primary and high schools that feed into all of these schools. So teachers are better upskilled. Schools are better off. We have the Department of Education, who is very, very vital in assisting us with this project because they come to the schools, to make sure that the project is going well. And our partnership with AECI has been particularly meaningful because it has allowed us to take this approach into communities. That is where we want to be, in rural communities. That is where we are going to make the change and where we have made the most change. And together, not only have we strengthened these ECD communities, we have now assisted in the community to help them to thrive. And the impact goes beyond the classroom. When you strengthen an ECD center and when you strengthen the small community and the schools and the high schools, you now empower the principal, you develop teachers. And it's not only about doing something for your community, it's about leaving a lasting change. It is about building the capacity within the community so that the impact continues long after we are gone. So it cannot only work while we are there. It has to be sustainable. And that is why we are working on this sustainable project with AECI. So long after we are gone, we can be sure that these ECD centers, these schools, these communities are going to thrive without us. And I think that the real value of the partnership that we have with AECI and with all the other service providers within this project is that we are not only investing in children today, Together, we are helping to build a stronger community for the future.
Thanks so much, Teresa. Interesting to hear how what started as an ECD project has really evolved into something a lot more holistic and covering multiple stakeholders and multiple stages of young people's lives. You've also touched on a couple of things that I'll move into in the Q&A. But for now, I'm going to ask Siyanda to please come on. Siyanda is from Sibanye-Stillwater, as I mentioned, and they have partnered with AECI. And I think what's interesting is to hear about how this happens. We often have companies partnering with nonprofits, and we do have nonprofits and service providers on the line. But companies partnering together, I think, is less common. And I wanted to ask Siyanda, how did the partnership come about? And what lessons have you learned about partnering with other companies to build community impact around your operations?
Thank you very much, Kathy, and good morning, colleagues. Just a quick background of how our partnership with the AECI started. So we have been working with AECI since 2013, ever since Sibanye was established. They've been providing explosive equipment to our gold as well as PGM operations. So I can say for 10 years, since 2013 until 2023, our relationship was more transactional. The turning point in our relationship started in 2023 when AECI agreed to form part of the Marikana Economic Renewal Program coalition partner. The Marikana Economic Renewal Program is a new sustainability business model that acknowledges that meaningful and systematic change cannot be achieved by a single business acting alone. Why in Marikana? Because we have operations across 5 provinces in South Africa. Marikana to us holds a deep history. I think, as we all know, it holds this deep history in the evolution of mining in South Africa. While Marikana was an industrial relations dispute, it was also a culmination of many years of mistrust that exists between mining houses as well as their employees, but also a mistrust that exists between mining houses and their own communities. The Marikana construct has forced the country, not just the mining sector, to reflect on how it should engage firstly with its employees, but also with its communities so that we don't repeat what happened in 2013. And I can say it's about 14 years since the massacre happened, and we are still learning on what we can do to really change the course of history. So our journey as Sibanye in Marikana really began when we acquired the Lomnin assets in 2019. It was part of broadening, of course, our PGM business in South Africa. As we're concluding that transaction, we knew that there are a number of social risks that we'll have to deal with. It was not just the tragic event that happened in 2013 that was providing us an opportunity to really rethink and reimagine how we're going to do sustainability differently. So in 2020, we launched the renewal program, which is really guided by principles of honor, engage, and create. So the Marikana Renewal Program is uniquely designed to demonstrate how a mining company can move beyond just a social license to operate requirements or a traditional social investment program. It really forces us to a more collaborative model that is stakeholder-led, but that is also going to drive the social transformation. At Sibanye, we realize that if you talk about Marikana, the real and ultimate healing is not just about really addressing issues with the widows, but it can be achieved when we all work together with different partners that are operating within that ecosystem. Of course, our sustainability framework as a business assets that we need to co-create socio-economic compacts and facilitate a just transition to post-mining economy. So this has necessitated that we bring a step change in our own thinking as a business to ensure that we start to see how we can really achieve an enduring legacy and create a shared value to communities in which we operate. We are currently collaborating with AECI in 2 projects. One is focusing on addressing illegal waste dump within communities in Marikana. We're working with various stakeholders, including PETCO, to ensure that we have a circular economy practices that are deeply embedded in communities that we operate in. We've also ensured that this is not just a cleanup program, but it's linked to our sustainability strategy of ensuring that we're able to ensure that there is zero waste to landfill by 2030. AECI is also supporting an eco-bakery that provides services to different retail partners within Marikana. And the lessons that are learned out of this is that in order to really rebuild trust and restore dignity and create lasting shared value in community, we need to ensure that we work together as corporate South Africa and ensure that there's a paradigm shift from the traditional CSI approach, which is normally influenced by thinking that you have all the solutions that are facing the communities where you operate. You also need to ensure that you define what success looks like where you operate, and you also need to embrace partnership. And I think with AECI having joined what we call the coalition of the willing, which is bringing across different like-minded businesses who share the same vision of really changing people's lives in Marikana, but also bring partners that share the same business ethos as you. And lastly, one of the lessons is to ensure that you co-design and co-create solutions with communities that will ensure that you're working together with them. So AECI is one of the 22 partners that have joined the coalition of the willing in Marikana, which include our suppliers, as you know that they are our supplier. But we've also invited government, UN agencies, international NGOs, which include Africa Tikkun, and private sector to ensure we're all committing to a Marikana that is renewed. And in conclusion, I'd really like to say, while we started this in Marikana, but we have been able to use this blueprint in other operations in South Africa. We've launched similar initiatives in Free State as well as in Gauteng, and we've been successful to bring additional partners that together have brought more than 300 million in external funding to support different initiatives in green economy, in digital economy, in circular economy, like the one we're doing in Marikana with AECI. All these initiatives are ensuring that we're able to really craft a localized just transition and post-mining economy for both our gold as well as PGM operations. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sianda. I think you've raised a very important point there, which is that no single organization can affect lasting change in a community on its own. And it's great to hear about the Marikana Economic Renewal Program and how many partners you've brought into that. Because I think Teresa also touched on working with government, which I think is also so important if you're working in these communities, and you mentioned the same. So we'll look a bit more at that partnership topic in the discussion, but thank you for your intro. I'm going to ask Sarah Jane Brink, who's with Siyabonga Africa, to come on now. They work on something called the Level Up Initiative with AECI, and it actually speaks to some of what Sianda was mentioning in terms of the bakery and economic development. So they do skills development, enterprise support, and job creation programs. So Sarah, could you please tell us a little bit about the initiative and what you think are the key ingredients to help communities move from dependency to economic participation?
Thank you, Kathy. Good morning, everybody. As Kathy just mentioned, my name is Sarah. I head up the organization, a non-profit organization called Siyabonga Africa. And the Level Up initiative is one that was co-designed between Siyabonga Africa and AECI. And the purpose was to help communities in which AECI operates to establish social enterprises. It actually started in 2021 after we piloted a project in 2019. We established a social enterprise in a KZN community, and it proved not only resilient, but sustainable and above that, impactful through devastating tragedies such as COVID-19, civil unrest, the floods of KZN. And the purpose of the program essentially is to empower communities to sustainably contribute toward their own economic growth, to create jobs and various income opportunities for young unemployed people in their communities, and to also become community impactors. So as much as we call our businesses social enterprises, we're starting to move more to the idea of impact enterprises because they are sharing skills and reinvesting a portion of their profits to various community upliftment activities. So the program includes providing technical skills training to a community. We provide equipment, raw materials to start a business tools, customized one-to-one business coaching sessions and business model development bespoke for their particular community and circumstances, brand development, the establishment of an online presence such as a website, social media platforms, Google Business, and compliance. We focus on setting up businesses that address the basic needs of the community and provide solutions in the form of products and services. We look mainly at bakeries. That has been one of our most successful businesses, but we have also included additional income streams such as food gardens, clothing and textile manufacturing, and poultry projects. We currently have 11 impact enterprises nationally in the areas in which AECI has their operations, with over 20 income streams collectively. In 2025, these businesses created 170 work and economic participation opportunities for young unemployed people. And the businesses are also showing that they have a community impact, whereby they are assisting vulnerable households, participating in community upliftment programs. Recently in Marikana, the Echo Bakery used a portion of their profits to upgrade ablutions in a school where the ablutions were completely dilapidated and the children didn't have good facilities to use. The bakery upgraded that facility for the school. So the community impact, we're looking at how we can create a rand value so we can understand what that looks like. And we are estimating that for this year, the reinvestment back into the community on a national scale will be approximately 1 million rand. On a quarterly basis, there's over 1,000 vulnerable community members nationally that are now receiving some kind of support sustainably from these social enterprises. The project, the Level Up Initiative, has been recognized locally and internationally through the Gender Mainstreaming Awards, the Kaya Awards, and then recently this year, the initiative received a gold award at the International Symbol competition. The premise of the Level Up program is that we don't just set up a business and leave. There is an ongoing business support program and structure that is in place. We have essentially created 5 levels of sustainability, and our goal is to move the business from one level to the next, from intense support, slowly handing over responsibility to the community to be able to run their own businesses sustainably. Once a business is set up, they form part of a national network. So we've actually formed a community of social enterprises where there is a lot of peer engagement and peer support nationally. There are group business coaching sessions. There are category business coaching sessions while we are still giving each business individual attention. In terms of what makes a business move from a community move from dependency to economic participation, I think, Kathy, that is a very complex question. I don't know if I have all the answers to that, but through our experience, I can share a few key success factors that we have found. In setting up a social enterprise, first and foremost, you need to identify the right people in the community to work with. People who will own and champion and drive the business on the ground. We've also found that the purpose behind setting up a business really contributes towards its success. If a business is purely profit-driven for individual gain, we find that it is not as successful as setting up a business whereby there's a larger idea of this is bigger than me. I can use this business to create impact within my community and thereby have a sense of purpose that drives me even when things are difficult. Obviously, communities need skills, they need business knowledge, they need resources, infrastructure plays a big role. The community at large needs to buy in to the concept and to support the concept and to understand. Essentially, there's a lot of engagement that needs to take place and awareness, because they need to essentially understand how this business benefits them as well. And then finally, I think that the long-term approach to sustainable impact is key. You need patience. There is obviously in our program a phased support from more of a hand-holding and slowly transferring accountability and responsibility over to the owners of the business. And to have those accountability measures in place, I think, is also very important. Ultimately, what happens when you set up a social enterprise, the ripple effects speak back to people now being able to access food, good quality products at a low cost, jobs, young people that are now working. We've experienced some people that have been hopeless on the point of suicide that are now finding purpose in working in a bakery. Young women have escaped from abusive situations because they are now able to earn an income and stand on their own 2 feet. Single moms are able to provide a better life for their children, giving them access to transport so that they can go to school. The dropout rates of schools have decreased. In some cases, crime has decreased in the areas where our businesses are operating. So these are some of the ripple effects that we are now seeing, where these businesses have become almost economic anchors in the areas in which AECI has their operations. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah. There's parallels between what you and Teresa were saying in the two different sectors. Teresa with the life cycle approach, and you with the phased kind of long-term sticking with these organizations through the different levels. To everyone watching, you've now heard the perspectives of all of our panelists for today. So please do feel free to ask your questions using that green Ask a Question button, and I will take them up from there. But for now, I'm going to pick up on a topic that was mentioned most recently by Sarah, who spoke about community buy-in, but also by Sianda and Nicole in terms of how to work with communities. Nicole, I'm going to come to you first. And you mentioned some baseline studies you did around your operations, but how did you and how do you identify and prioritize the needs in the communities around your operations? What partners do you work with? How do you involve the communities? You know, how did you shift to this approach and identify what the communities actually needed?
Thanks, Kathy. I think for us, it has to be stakeholder-led. It has to be led by your community. It's very, very, we would be so silly to think we can sit in a boardroom and understand what our communities need. So very much aligning with the stakeholders, depending on the operational context and the setup of the community, be it remote, be it rural, semi-urban, you find different dynamics. Sometimes you're dealing with a chief, etc. We all know that. But I think socioeconomic data is very, very much available today. So there's no lack of knowledge about the socioeconomic needs in South Africa. We know we are the most unequal society. There are integrated development plans, municipal plans, national development plans available. We've got the BBBE codes telling us it's about an organization like AECI saying, well, these challenges are very well documented, but how do we determine where AECI can make a meaningful, relevant, and deliberate, sustainable contribution? So are we going to zone in and streamline and focus on education, for example, on social impact programs, or, you know, making sure that you can't solve everyone's needs. You can try, and I like what Sia said earlier, making sure that you have an integrated ecosystem that can solve for that need. So you identify the priorities, but really making sure that when you go into the program delivery phase, that you know it's going to be a long-term commitment. You know it's going to be a journey that you walk. Sarah spoke about the different phases. Some of the businesses that we've worked with, the social enterprises, we're still providing ongoing coaching and business support, because you've invested so much time and effort and resources, making sure that they can run on their own, that there are no triggers or no societal issues that's going to make them, lose the very great work that they've already established and built, and that they can just expand from there. So I think that's the trick. The trick is not identifying the priority and the need. That is well documented. Saying, well, as an organization, what do we want to solve for? And what do we want to solve for well and sustainably, to be able to then really drive that outcomes-based model, etc.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm going to bring in Sia here, because I'm interested to hear about community participation, if we stay on this topic. In your Marikana Renewal Program, you mentioned you've got your partners, it's a coalition of the willing, you've got some government members, but who represents the community? Like, who is the community and how are they involved in the process?
So in Marikana, we have quite a broad-based engagement that is really driven by our community affairs team. When we arrived, there was fragmentation within communities. And for the first time now, we have been able to bring this broad number of stakeholders, ranging from faith-based leaders to youth organizations to women's group and the broader community, to really a single source of truth of where we would want to go from Marikana and see it in by 2050. And we had to craft that together with the communities. It's not something that we designed it alone as Sibanye. Now we have a blueprint that really articulates the areas where they would like to really see improvement. And of course, the first one was to really understand that the platinum that exists there won't be there for life. We have an end of life, in as much as we still have 40 years, but we needed to ensure that we bring awareness to communities to understand that when we reach the end of life in 2070, what kind of economies they wanted to see. And that's why we're talking about circular economy, digital economy, green economy. It's an articulation of what came out of the broad-based engagement that we've been having with these different community stakeholders that we have traversed the journey with since 2019. So having that voice in the decision-making and ensuring that you're able to co-design and co-create that compact makes it easier for us to do business in Marikana.
Thanks, Sia. I'm just interested to follow up, like, who is that voice? Who represents the community in your coalition?
So we have a number of stakeholders. We have NGO platform that we host quarterly. We have what we've called Coalition of the Willing, which also is a platform that brings all different community stakeholders, from organized business within Marikana to NGOs to faith-based leaders that we've collaborated with, for example, in gender-based violence programs. So it's a multiple stakeholder grouping that ensures that it's not just a single person, it's not just a councillor that represent the communities, but we're able to bring different community voices. As you will know, needs for youth organization will be different for needs of a women-led organization. So we have made sure that we're able at different intervals to communicate with them individually, but also ensure that we create this broad-based platform of engagement, which ensures whether we want to engage for social and labor plan or want to engage for environmental related issue, are able to have a mechanism that brings them into one room with a single source of vision of where they would like to take Marikana forward.
Thank you. I think that's useful, because we often talk about communities, without really defining who and what that actually means. I wanted to talk more about partnerships, but before that, I'm going to pick up one of the questions from our delegates, from Gail. It's a question for you, Sarah Jane, which is how, because you spoke about one of your most important key success factors being the people. How do you identify the people or person in the community to run the social enterprise so that it is non-political, fair, and for the right reason?
Okay, thank you. First of all, when we are doing our recruitment process, we ensure that we're doing it transparently and in partnership with our funding partner, AECI. AECI has offices in the various communities that they operate, and they have representatives that would then work with us. And then we include various other stakeholders, whether it be the mines, other nonprofit organizations, in our recruitment processes. Then from there, I think the most important thing is that we identify people that are already doing something within the community, but they don't necessarily have the knowledge or the resources to be able to achieve the impact that they desire to achieve. And so we come in and support something that is already in place and not necessarily starting something from scratch. We also don't like the approach of forcing a solution or an intervention onto a community or a person. We like to rather identify somebody who is already doing something in terms of running a business or in terms of supporting their community. For example, there's a lady by the name of Sheila. She runs a bakery, a food garden, and various other income streams now in Hammanskraal. And when we met her, she had a small little room and she had 10 elderly gogos in her community, and they had a piece of land that they were trying to plant vegetables for their own food security and then to sell. And this was an ideal candidate because Sheila already had the heart for the community. She had leadership skill. She was well networked within the community. There was trust. There was leadership structures that supported her. She had a certain amount of infrastructure in place. And so the work that AECI and Siyabonga Africa brought into the community really just supported what was already in seedling form within the community, and we just helped that grow.
Thank you. Useful again. I think a lot of entrepreneurship programs say the same. The key is finding that person, and you need that person. You know, it's not something you create, but you find someone who's already an entrepreneur, who already has that passion. I see there's 2 more questions that have come in for Sia, just based on what you were saying, Sia. So I'm quickly going to raise those before moving on to some questions for myself. But Nonjabulo asks, how often do you engage with the stakeholders in your Sibanye Renewal Coalition of the Willing? And Gugu asks, what or where are the projects in Gauteng and Bloemfontein that you referred to? So can you quickly just answer those 2?
So firstly, in Marikana, we have a dedicated team of community affairs that is on a day-to-day basis is engaging stakeholders across the length and breadth of Marikana. But the Coalition of the Willing engagements, which also forms part of the broad-based engagement that we do quarterly, it takes place quarterly. We, as I've mentioned, we also have various engagement, but a dedicated one that is focusing on various NGOs that are participating in Marikana. So simple answer, it's quarterly, but also a dedicated team that is really responsible for ensuring that stakeholder needs are addressed on a daily basis, is also institutionalized within our Marikana office. The Machabeng Coalition, which is where we work in the Free State, was also launched in 2024, following a number of organizations who also raised their hands to join a coalition of really seeing how they can form part of the solutions within the Machabeng local municipality. We currently have a project that we're doing together with the municipality, a circular economy park, which is looking at organic waste, which is turned into compost. We're currently exploring adding plastic waste and working with Petco. We are also collecting for now e-waste. So ultimately, we hope the circular economy park will be that center of excellence on how we can really address issues linked to illegal waste dumping. Last year, we also launched a digital hub that we're implementing together with the Mine Workers Development Agency. And for the first time, people in and around the Machabeng local municipality are able to be trained on digital skills and being exposed to the latest technologies such as extended reality. We have a podcast studio which allows all young people who want to really participate within the platform economy. We also not just focusing on digital skills, but we're also focusing on digital entrepreneurship, because not everyone is really interested to enter the world of work after they have attained their digital skills. So there are two pathways within the digital economy park that we've established. One is on really providing the contemporary skills within the digital economy, but also really an incubation program which seeks to really bring digital businesses that can participate within the value chain.
Thank you, Sia. I think you definitely did answer those two questions, and I think it's an important point that you make, that although the coalition or the collective meets quarterly, there's ongoing individual stakeholder engagement happening by a team in your company. I'm going to pick a question from Lynn now for Nicole, and I'm going to ask this across a couple of the panelists, because I think it's an important area. And that is, as we move to this integrated approach and we're looking at longer term impact rather than just outputs, what are some of the key lessons that you have learned in measuring long-term impact? And what is the cost of measurement and your timeframes of impact? That question was addressed to Nicole, but I'm going to pick it up with a few panelists.
The key measure is patience. Kathy, I think when you make this mind shift in terms of long impact, you've got to really know that you're in it for the long haul. And it varies. The time frames varies from an education program to an economic development program. You'll find that you are finding a buyback center or a waste management project at a specific maturity level, and all they require is a layer of further support or infrastructure and coaching. Sarah would tell you she's identified gems in the community of existing women who are already investing their time in, and so the trajectory is shorter as opposed to starting from foundation phases. So the answer is there is no time frame that is universal for everyone. It really varies. Patience is important. Success looks like being able to step away and that program runs. I keep on saying this, but I can't emphasize it enough. So that economic development program or that social enterprise, the commercial bakery or the commercial agriculture or the poultry is interrelated, and there are jobs created. They've expanded. You heard the Marikana case study of Eco Bakery investing their own proceeds in community development, so that when they become the anchor of the community, they open up another branch or they've expanded. That's the measure of success for me. They are more commercially viable. Their revenue has increased. Their job creation has increased. That's how we measure our long-term outcomes and impact. And I don't want to get into an M&E discussion, but how do we do it? With the support of Trialogue. They've come on board and really wireframed our M&E plan. And we've had some robust debates around how do we co-create this long-term journey? How do we manage expectations of the community, of our board, for example, of our foundation? We live in a world where we want to see quick returns, quick fixes. Unfortunately, in this long-term impact space, it's about taking your role to help establish necessary foundations, capabilities, partnerships, and market connections, not to create permanent financial dependency. That for me is what success looks like. I hope I've answered your question, Kathy.
Thanks. Yeah, you have. And I'm going to, as I mentioned, I think it's such an important topic. And the example that you drew on was almost the simpler one, where you've got an enterprise and it can become a sustainable enterprise. Sometimes with other interventions in communities, that's not an option. And I want to bring Teresa in at this point. And you've spoken about the cradle to career approach. How do you keep track of learners from early childhood through schooling and beyond? And how do you measure this cradle to career approach?
Okay, so Kathy, we are fortunate where we have an online assessment center. It's the Bambanani Online Assessment Center, where we have tracked to date 75,000, just over 75,000 children across, starting in ECD. And that is where I want to start. That is the impact. When we speak about impact and change, for us, by the time a child leaves our ECD center, we have a slogan called Certain by 6. We want to make sure that that child is ready to enter grade 1. And we track them on the online assessment center. We never want to over assess children, no, but we do have to track them. We cannot just come in at the age of 4 and take the Thrive by 5 stats and say X number of children are not thriving. We want to track them from the age of literally 6 months old when they come into these ECD centers, track their milestones, crawling, walking, eating. And then we start more of a like a formal assessment from about the age of 2. Do they know their colors, their shapes, their angles? Do they know how to count? Do they know like basic numeracy and basic literacy? And we start assessing and tracking them from the age of 2 on our online assessment center, where world trends and world studies have proven you cannot assess a child in one sitting, in 1 month, in one age group. It's got to be literally from the age of 2 right up to now it's time for them to leave us and go into our grade 1 program, into the primary school, into our cradle to career approach. And we've tracked them. Now, are they certain by 6? Are they school ready? Where are the gaps? And that's the importance of tracking them along the way, is where are the gaps? What do they not know how to do? And where we find gaps, we then find gaps in teaching. And that then helps us also to train teachers better in the classroom. And then we track them going into grade 1. Now with AECI, the schools that we work with, it's the ECD center in the same community. That's literally a 5-minute walk to the primary school. That's a 5-minute walk to the high school, and it's a feeder school. And then we start tracking them along their journey. Now they're in grade 1, into grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, from grade 7 into high school. And we monitor and track them right through. So it's not just about investing once off. That is when funding eventually dries out. How do we then maintain the child's path? How do we hold their hand right through school, to then get to matric? So obviously, all this data for now, we only have the results from them entering through the through the different avenues, going from ECD into grade 1, into the primary school, and now we're tracking them from primary to high school. But 10 and 20 and 30 years, from now, we'll have all of these results on our online assessment center, where we can actually prove and show where the funding is going and how the impact has paid off. So for me, the impact for us is in education, and that is how we are tracking them at the moment.
Thank you. It's going to be interesting to see when you have that first cohort coming through. But as you say, it's obviously a long life cycle. But good to hear that you are tracking the same learners through that life cycle. While we're on the topic of measuring impact, there's a question that's come in from, and I might be pronouncing this incorrectly, but Dijon, who says to Nicole and Sianda, are you using intelligent digital platforms to verify measurable impact on a continuous basis with a focus on live data, so proactive insights, to manage population data rather than periodic reporting? Nicole, Sia, I don't know if you want to come in on that one.
Yeah, thank you. I'll give it a first shot. On our side as Sibanye, we have a very robust M&E system, which really is tracking different indicators for different outcomes that we'd like to see. And we have digitalized it. And of course, you'll know that it starts with ensuring that whenever you start a new project, you start with its clear theory of change, so that you can define what success looks like. And we have been able to really go beyond just program outputs, to really track where we would like to see the greatest impact. Thanks.
Thanks, yeah. Nicole, do you want to add anything to that?
Perhaps I'll just add the support we get from Trialogue on a live dashboard that we can, showcase and check at any time. Of course, as we progress, we are seeing a shift from, purely seeing outputs to then those outcomes and impact over time, which is very interesting. And so what's nice about the dashboard is you can slice and dice information to see, impact across the community lens, a national lens, a focus area lens, etc., and compare it with the years before, because you are in it for the long term. So you can go back to when you started and then really track. But yeah, real-time data tells you a bigger story than what you can see periodically. So that's a very good question. Thanks.
Thanks both. And I think it's something that companies and other funders continue to work on, because I think real-time data is difficult. And when you're working in rural areas with partners that may not have the capacity for real-time data, it's how do we collect data in a way that works for everyone. But yeah, thanks for that question. Before I move on to the next, I want to put up the next poll, please. Which looks at our third poll, which looks at the challenges. So the question is, what do you think is the biggest challenge to creating lasting community impact? And you can only select one. Obviously, this is a big question, and multiple of these will apply. But we just want to get a sense of what our audience thinks in terms of what the biggest challenges are. And then I'm going to bring in some of our panelists to speak to their experience. Sarah, I'm going to start with you as the votes come in, and I'll tell you once more people have voted what they say. But what are some of the challenges that you've experienced when trying to create these sustainable organizations and economic participation? And yeah, what do you think some of the mistakes that organizations make are?
Thank you, Kathy. I can only talk from my experience. I don't know what the mistakes are for everybody else, but some of the challenges that we faced in perhaps helping people find employment or helping people become economically active have to do not only with an environment, but sometimes psychosocial issues as well. Sometimes people, or oftentimes we find a lack of self-belief or self-confidence in a lot of people, that come from very difficult environments. And that is a barrier that needs to be overcome in order to assist them to have the mindset that they can actually become more self-dependent and run a business or work. Some of the other challenges we find is, and Nicole mentioned it earlier, is patience. It feels like everybody's looking for a bit of a quick fix. It's taken a long time for us to find ourselves in the situations we are in. And, there's a whole history that has happened to bring us to this point. And I think our expectations need to be managed, because oftentimes we just want to find a solution that works somewhere and copy and paste it as quickly and as fast as possible. And that's not always the solution. What works in one community doesn't necessarily work in another community. And so, having more of a long-term approach helps. So don't quit too easily. And I also think partnership and collaboration is very important. And this is something that I really appreciate about AECI, in that, usually when you're working with funding partners, there is, for example, a 12-month program that you're running, and partners want to see impact within those 12 months. And sometimes it's taken Siyabonga Africa, 12 to 18 months to find the right beneficiary in an area and to start working with them slowly. And, having the opportunity to have a partner like Nicole and AECI has been amazing because there has been this level of understanding. We've been able to communicate. We've had to problem solve together oftentimes. Even if we don't always agree on things, we've had an open platform of communication to be able to work through issues, and these things happen. And sometimes that's not always taken into consideration. So AECI has shown an amazing amount of support in understanding that things don't happen overnight, and you can't set up a business today and within 6 months you're creating jobs and you're generating income. Globally, the statistics are that 95% of startup enterprises close within the first 5 years. So it's not a quick fix solution. It does take time. So these are some of the challenges that I think we face.
Thanks, Sarah. It actually looks like a pretty split in terms of the voting. Votes are still coming in, but I'm just gonna mention, sure, yeah, it is actually split. So the three that most people have voted for, at 18% each at the moment, in terms of challenges, one is community participation and buy-in, and I think that's been mentioned by a few of the panelists. The other is limited funding, and I think if you're looking at developing an entire community around your operations, firstly, you need those partnerships, but also it requires significant funding. And the third one is something you just mentioned, Sarah, the short funding cycles. So those three are sitting at the highest. And Sia, can I bring you in to comment on what some of the challenges have been for Sibanye and your thoughts on those responses that we're getting to the poll?
Yeah, thank you. For us, the biggest challenge, of course, coming into Marikana was to really deal with the legacy. And it has been one of the difficult challenges, but I'm happy to say 7 years ever since we've entered Marikana, we've been able to achieve most of the things that were recommendations from Falam Commission, or built houses for the widows, but we have gone beyond just the widows and those that were tragically affected by the event to really look at how we can renew the whole society instead of focusing at our employees or those who are affected, to take an integrated, comprehensive approach that says, if you really want healing in Marikana, you need to go beyond and ensure that everyone is able to benefit from what is accrued from mining. And for us, that recognition really forced us, and that's why we talked about the paradigm shift from a traditional CSI approach or impact investing approach to the one that really acknowledges that if you really want to make a systematic change, you need to bring in different partners in the room. And that's why we've extended the Marikana Renewal Vision to a number of organizations, because we strongly believe that the African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you go together. And we are going together with organizations such as AECI to change the facade of Marikana to be a better one. And I think we've been able to sell a story that says, how can we reimagine Marikana to be that doyen of a thriving mining community in South Africa?
Thanks, Sianda. I'm going to pick up on a topic there and bring Teresa in before coming to you, Nicole. But Teresa, I think Sia's emphasized many times the importance of partnership. And it will be interesting to hear from a non-profit perspective, to what degree do you partner with other non-profits in the areas that you're working in? And also how, what distinguishes a really good corporate partnership from ones that are more transactional?
Our biggest success is in communities where we have partnered with other NGOs. It's impossible to do it alone. The landscape is impossible. We work in the most rural parts of South Africa. It's always been our philosophy to not go for the low-hanging fruit, but to go to areas literally where nobody else has even driven past. And to be able to get into those areas, we need partners. We cannot do it alone. It's impossible. So we have many, many NGOs that we've worked with in terms of infrastructure, feeding, growing gardens, working with women, training, even as far as transport. You know, getting to these places is really, really difficult. You cannot drive on roads. So, you know, things like transport, community buy-in, things like, you know, the plumber, the electrician, the builder, and the painter within the community, to even have their buy-in and to work together with the entire community. So it's not only working with NGOs, it's working with the community members and the community service providers within that community. So we can all do it together. And for us, it does. It takes a village to raise a child. It's not only the teacher, it's not only us, it's not only the parent, it's the entire community, it's all the NGOs that can possibly get together to make that change. And then you were speaking about corporates. Being transactional, those are the corporates that we don't really want to work with. For them, it's about ticking boxes. For them, it's about numbers. It's about, you know, can I get to 100,000? Can I get to 1 million? Can I get to X number? That we don't do. You know, for us, it's about dig deep, not wide. It's about making a meaningful impact. Rather stay within that smaller community and make a 360, so we call it 360. It's a 360 approach to that community, rather than trying to scale and tick boxes. So transactionally is more about ticking boxes. It's about numbers. It's about giving numbers. It's about giving funding. It's about signing contracts. That doesn't work. And that is why our partnership works so well with AECI, because for them, they're investing in people. As Nicole said earlier as well, it's about a dig deep approach. And we also have, you know, wonderful partnerships with our CSI partners, you know, like Capitec Bank, for example. For them also, they invest in people where they don't only fund ECD centers or schools. Every regional manager or every branch manager has to be a volunteer and be involved in the project. So they will then select an ECD center close to their branch, and it's their responsibility to go there once a month, to visit the center, to help the principal with her finances, to make sure that, you know, that their needs are met. So that is why, you know, your question earlier, that is why it's really important to find a CSI or a donor or a funder where it's not only about, you know, transactional giving. It's about investing in people and investing in a community and making lasting change.
Teresa. I'm going to move to some more questions that have come in from our delegates. Nicole, two for you. The first one is from Petoro and says, what is your approach? What is the approach you take in designing interventions meant to diversify the local economies where you operate alongside other partners, particularly in areas, if you can give some examples apart from Marikana? So if you're in one of these areas where it's dominated by mining or a manufacturing plant, what approach do you take to diversifying that economy? That's the first one. And then the second one for you, which I think would be of relevance to a lot of nonprofits in the audience, but does AECI place an RFP for new projects at all? Or how do nonprofits apply to work with AECI in your communities?
Thanks. To the first question, Kathy, I think we have blueprinted what I think is currently commercially viable or feasible in terms of social entrepreneurship. So with the help of Siyabonga Africa, we've actually, you'll hear the word pilot quite a lot floating from some of our partners, because we kind of test something and then we scale it, because we know it has a 90% success rate with local relevance that we have to apply. So how do we diversify our economic development program? We partner with an organization called Kusini Water. We found that water security is becoming a complete pressing need in our communities. And instead of just drilling, cleaning water, and making it available to our ECD centers, we've decided that that could also be an economic income stream. And so water kiosks have started popping up everywhere, which was something we didn't plan for. And that's the beauty of being fluid and not compliance driven, because these evolutions really come out so nicely when you are open to a growth journey. In the Siyabonga Africa example, I know that Sarah has been amazing at identifying sustainable stitching as an avenue for additional income. So another demographic of in addition to the commercial bakery, the commercial agriculture, we've identified women and mothers from the very same ECD centers that we support in Africa Tikkun, with Africa Tikkun, mothers, unemployed women that are willing to do sustainable stitching, and started piloting that, and that is growing lovely. We've piloted poultry farming, so the eggs go into the baking and contribute quite a high amount in terms of the overheads of the baking. And poultry farming has contributed significantly to either selling eggs or the supporting of the bakery. So we've been open to that diversification as long as it's within a specific partner's expertise to provide accredited skills training, and then walking that journey of the social entrepreneur to the sustainable development avenue. I hope that's answered the first question. The second question, sorry, I just want to touch on the agriculture part in terms of diversification as well. Some of our commercial agriculture projects are evolving significantly well, and they'll be onboarded onto our enterprise development leg on the Kula side. So Kula is a small business we've acquired in our agri division on providing access for commercial agriculture. So these are then the guys who are really operating at a greater scale and can then really fully participate in the economy. Secondly, how can you apply to partner with us? On our website, there is an application form that you can apply. So if you go to www.aeciworld.com, on our social responsibility page, there should be a link there that plugs into our grant management platform. Thanks, Kathy.
Thanks, Nicole. I'm going to ask to bring up, because I can see we running out of time, but to bring up the last poll, please, which speaks to which factor you think is the most important for creating lasting community impact. And I'll wait for those to come in. In the meantime, Sia, I wanted to bring you in here to say what practical lessons could other companies learn, companies in other sectors, from the mining industry's experience, and Sibanye's in particular, of working so closely with your host communities. I think the mining industry has a lot that it can share with the others on our call.
In fact, the current engagement that we're having, not just now in Marikana, but with the broader companies that are operating within the platinum group metals, is how do we form a broader coalition that transcends Marikana to look at real issues that are facing the overall mining sector in the Northwest. So it has moved from a localized kind of an engagement to a more provincial or meso approach, where we're engaging our peers, such as Valterra and Teresa, that are surrounding us, to really try to see how can we deepen together into one fund. So, and these are also discussions that are also taking place within the regulator, which is really trying to explore how mining companies can, instead of focusing on their own individual projects, because we're servicing the same communities, to really create a fund at a provincial level that will be able to address issues related to infrastructure development, where we operate issues of water, electricity, road remain one of the biggest pressing challenges. And if you really want to make that meaningful change, you need to bring in your peers, you need to bring in your suppliers, you need to bring in different government entities, at the UN as well as NGOs. So it's an approach that we're now starting to see how we scale it up. We've seen that it works at a localized level, but given the multiple challenges that are facing communities where mining is taking place, we've realized that under the ambit of the Minerals Council, we need to really pilot this approach of working together as the mining sector, bringing along the different partners that we already work with to find lasting solutions to problems that are facing mining communities.
Thank you. That's encouraging to hear that you're looking at sharing those learnings and that approach in a broader area. I can see votes are still coming in on the last poll, which is which factor is most important for creating lasting community impact. At the moment, the highest scoring one is creating livelihood and economic opportunities, and I know that's been a common thread through a lot of this discussion, is how do you create sustainable, how do you diversify economies and create sustainable jobs and businesses. The next highest one is building long-term partnerships, and I think that's been another common thread, with SIA in particular focusing on that. And meaningful community participation is coming in after that. So I'm going to now, given that we have 10 minutes left, I want to give all of our panelists a chance for closing comments, just based on a little bit what you've heard from the response from our delegates in terms of the poll and the conversation we've had today. And can you also just address the question of what do you think is the single biggest shift that organizations, whether companies or nonprofits, need to make if they want to move from funding projects to creating lasting community impact? And Sarah, I'm going to start with you, please.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you so much for hosting this amazing opportunity. I have learned so much out of this as well. From my side, I think what is very important is, from a funder's perspective, to really understand their theory of change. When you are going to be solving problems or to be addressing social issues, you need to know essentially why you're doing what you're doing and what you expect the outcomes or the impact to be, and start with that end in mind and work your way backwards, and then find partners that align with your theory of change. And I think that's what AECI has done so well in terms of finding partners that align with the theory of change and being able to communicate that. We've attended workshops with AECI where they have explained in detail their theory of change to us, given us the opportunity to also respond and to show how we either align or where we might be missing. So there has been a lot of conversation that has taken place before interventions are implemented. And if you have the end in mind, and you know what the impact is that you're looking for, that is, instead of trying to put a plaster on something, it does give you the opportunity to stick it out in the long run and ensure that there is that lasting change and there is that impact that you are looking for. And then also, when you're working with communities, we try to avoid the mindset of seeing the people we work with as beneficiaries or objects of charity, but we want to see them and ensure that they also see themselves as our partners. So, we have the funding partner, the implementing partner, and from a beneficiary perspective, you have the community partner or the champion. And when you approach it in that way, they don't have the expectation that you are then there to save them and you are then there to help them, but they realize that they have their own agency and they need to take responsibility as well. And those expectations are managed. And if that relationship can be sustained through communication and transparency and honesty, I really think that you can see that long-term lasting impact that you're looking for.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, the importance of theory of change and having an idea of what success looks like for you. And I think to your second point, there's actually a comment that's just come in from Nomvula, who said we should ensure that communities are participants in the process, and the processes are co-created, that there has to be ownership. And I think you've just spoken to exactly that point. So thank you. Sia, I'm going to ask you to come on, please, for your closing comment and your thoughts on the biggest shift organizations need to make.
So the biggest shift, of course, is to ensure that you traverse the journey with your communities. I think I've made a principal point that gone are the days where corporates think they have solution to each and every challenge that exists there. As you walk that journey with your communities, you need to prioritize. I think the biggest trap is to think that you'll be able to solve all the challenges. So you need to create some guardrails around what are the 3 or 5 issues that you'd like to save so that you are able to focus solely on those and you're not distracted. So having those guardrails around priorities and ensuring that you communicate effectively. There's nothing that builds trust than being true to the word that you have said. So if you've said in the next coming 5 years, this is our focus area and this is what we're going to deliver. If there's a pivot, you need to go back to the same people that you committed to communicate that we have changed, we are going in this direction. And I think, to me, that clear communication really brings trust with communities that you work with. And of course, we have said that you won't be able to walk the journey alone. You need to bring everyone on board. And that ensures that you're not just achieving your own goals, but you're ensuring that they're at a scale. When it comes to development, there is no competition. And that's why we're bringing in our peers within the mining sector to say, how do we really reimagine the communities where we operate? How do we avoid living ghost towns? And how do we reimagine and diversify the economies of mining communities so that when there is no longer mining activities, you are able to have thriving communities and you're able to ensure that there is that enduring legacy and continued shared value that you share with your communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Sia. Emphasizing partnership again, but also bringing, I think, an important point that we haven't even got to cover today, but that of communication and ongoing communication with all the various stakeholders. So thank you for that. Teresa, if I can ask you for your closing comments, please.
Yes, thank you. For us, I think the single biggest shift is moving from funding interventions to investing in people and capacity. When we go into communities, we want to take away the mindset of handouts. We're not here to give you a handout. So we call it a hand up. We're actually here to improve your community together with you. We are going to work together with the corporate, with the community, with the business owner who is the ECD principal owner. We are giving you a hand up. We are here to improve what you have so that when we leave, you are sustainable on your own. And I mean, we all know that a project has a beginning and an end. Even if you are in an area for 10 or 20 or 30 years, eventually a project does end. And what happens when you are gone? That is most important, is for the community to be able to still be sustainable and to still be successful once the project funding has run out. And that is why during this project, we say, have we transferred knowledge? Have we built skills? Have we strengthened leadership? And have we given the communities the tools to continue without us? Then impact doesn't end when the funding runs out. And we also have to move away this mindset of how many people have we reached, how many lives, how many millions, how many thousands. We need to get away from that mindset. It's not about ticking boxes of numbers and scaling. Everybody's talking about scaling. Scaling is not about numbers. Scaling is about a successful pilot project that you can then take into a community and dig deep within that community. So we need to get away from that mindset. We have to rather change it and say, when we leave, will that community still thrive in years to come? And it's about creating capability within the community. So my ending line would be, it's not about just what happens today. It's not about what our funding is doing today. It's about what will happen tomorrow. And I think that is how we all have to look at it for long-term impact and sustainability.
Thanks, Teresa. I like that, the hand up. rather than the handout, and the depth versus the breadth. Nicole, I'm going to give you the final word before closing. If you could come in, please.
Thanks, Kathy, and to my fellow, I would call them family, because this is just really how the mindset shift also has to change. You become this unit of an ecosystem of partners that work together for a collective goal, and all have a mutual beneficial interest in changing and sustainably impacting the lives of others. So I would like to leave you with the following statement. Partnership becomes powerful when we move beyond shared intention to shared accountability, combining our strengths to create impact that none of us could have achieved alone. I'd like to say that again. Partnership becomes powerful when we move beyond shared intention to shared accountability, combining our strengths to create an impact that none of us could have created alone. I think being very humble and saying, alone AECI cannot achieve this, but with the right partnership, with the right ecosystem around us, and the collective shared accountability, we can make a much more deliberate and meaningful impact in the lives of the communities in which we operate.
Thanks, Nicole. I think that was a perfectly fitting last word, and really summed up, I think, a very common thread throughout this on the importance of partnerships. I want to thank AECI for supporting this webinar, and to thank all of our 4 panelists for your great insights. I really do appreciate it, and I think we've all learned from you. I thank our delegates too for all the questions and the great engagement on the platform. You'll see there's a link now to a short survey. I promise it's not long. Please do click on it and complete the survey, and look out for our next month's webinar. And as I mentioned up front, the recording and the write-up of this webinar will be shared with everyone that registered and will be uploaded to the Trialogue Knowledge Hub as well. So if you didn't manage to get on in the beginning, I saw there was a few technical issues, then the recording will be available. But thanks again to